Okay, so I watched Turning Red, and it's pretty great. I feel like with this and Luca, I'm actually really excited about current Pixar's weird faux postmodernist approach to storytelling. A lot of people say that Luca is a simple story with a simple plot, but that's not exactly true. You see, Luca's plot is simple in that it's just about these boys that think a Vespa's cool and want to win a race to earn money and buy the fucking sick, nasty, awesome Vespa. Luca's story isn't some straightforward, simple narrative, though, because its conflict isn't actually that clear. Luca's extremely self-aware that the whole movie, it never presents the Vespa as something to be taken seriously, so it never presents their struggle to win the race and buy the Vespa as, like, the core conflict, you know? Their struggle... Reality, like, Luca is a really abstract movie about things that are more complex and harder to define. It's a real look at childhood whimsy and what is motivating the characters to perceive their situation in this Vespa and freedom and running away from their parents or whatever as important, you know? There's so much subtextual storytelling going on under the surface about the backgrounds of these characters and how it impacts their approach to these fascinations. It's not something you can sum up in a single sentence, like with most kids' movies with a very cut-and-dried message. The same is basically true of Turning Red. The plot is mostly meaningless. You know, it's the most meaningless part of the entire film. It couldn't matter less. It has the structure of an indie film that it's not really about anything. It's just trying to honestly capture a certain feeling or idea. That's what I mean when I say this is the postmodernist era of Pixar. The stories they're telling aren't really rooted in a straightforward dramatic plot anymore. The concepts and values are extremely abstract. The films express themselves in metaphysical ways. Luca is both an expression of how it feels to be a child in many different ways, but it also frames itself from a bird's eye view. It allows us to see the faults of children. We see the representation of Luca's fantasies, but we see it from a heightened reality that makes it clear that we are watching childish delusions separate from reality. We see that they look ridiculous, idolizing any of these individual things, and we have a very clear perception that they'll probably stop giving a shit about this Vespa within, like, a week. Turning Red has a fairly straightforward and predictable plot. Unlike Luca, the plot isn't entirely abstract and meaningless, like some aside. May's conflict with her mother and family and the panda ritual are parts of a clearly defined message, which is a bit lamer than Luca, which keeps everything really vague in what the takeaways of the story are supposed to be. So yeah, Turning Red has kind of a bold version of the coming-of-age narrative where it's almost entirely pro-child. Sure, you have the blend of old and new, cultures and traditions reinforced by some of the not-so-subtle symbolism near the end, like when they combine pop music with traditional hymns and such. That's in here. You've got the generational ignorance and hypocrisy thing going, whatever. Its basic message is about child perfectionism, and I like that it's not presented like May is just a totally miserable girl before embracing her emotional flexibility. No, she's very content being a flawless mommy's girl, and also all of May's relatives, including her mother, all still at the end decide to banish their own pandas, so it's not like the story is purely suggesting that the panda is a good or a bad thing, it's just a messy thing. Ming is still a content person continuing to act in the very proper and reserved way that she was raised to. But yes, the movie is very pro-child. Like, sure, it will criticize May's violent incidents, but it's not the panda that makes her violent. Her anger is what fuels the panda, May would still need to learn emotional stability and self-control even if she banished the panda. That's why Ming flies off the handle at several points, because she was just taught to fear herself and repress herself and her emotions throughout her life. So she has no self-control when her emotions are overriding her judgment. Ming is bad at managing her emotions since she banished her panda instead of learning how to live with it. Even the bad stuff May does, like lying and possibly committing several crimes in her weird panda pyramid scheme and almost murdering Tyler and destroying a lot of property. Oh yeah, that reminds me, the movie ends with the Lee family seeming to be just like in several $1 million worth of debt to the local government for destroying a stadium, so that's great. I love that. But yeah, even the bad stuff May does, it's not really painted as a negative on May's part. It's kind of part of being a kid. You know, it's all valuable experiences that should be learned from rather than brushed aside and repressed or ignored. That's kind of the whole message. Let kids fuck up and learn from it rather than expecting them to be perfect from the start all the time. Then, when they aren't, they have no idea how to handle it, like with Ming. She doesn't know how to fucking handle it. But, none of that shit really matters. Let's talk about the actual appeal of this movie, which isn't the plot. Like I said, the plot is superficial as all hell. It is knowingly meaningless. The conflict in this movie is mostly about trying to go see a boy band concert that is already presented as like a silly young girl thing to not be taken seriously in the first place. The movie is kind of funny, but like straightforward humor isn't the draw either. The movie thrives in pure authenticity. Everything feels like it was created with no bullshit. A real understanding of actual life that isn't sugar-coated or manufactured. The kids act like kids. Not like movie kids, but like kids. This is the most true-to-life feeling kids movie I've ever seen in my life. As in, it perfectly captures both the casual but authentic cringe of children. And it captures how children feel and post-ironic, like, reflections on childhood. Like, perfect small example, right? There's a scene that isn't really drama, isn't really comedy. It's just kids actually doing, like, just a silly kid thing. Where they have, like, this, really early on in the movie, they have, like, this short sing-along together prompted in this awkward way by this awkward kid. And instead of doing the movie thing where they make they don't make the characters, like, mix together and sound good, mix their audio levels. They sing like bad children's singers, not harmonizing or matching pace. But it's not played to the opposite extreme, where it's, like, played to laugh at how fucking bad they are. It's just kind of real. It's not traditionally entertaining. It's not really funny for the audience either. It just feels authentic to the experience of childhood. I'm also impressed that Ming comes across throughout the whole movie as charming and likable, considering what her personality and role in the plot is. She feels lovably misguided, and like a slightly extreme version of a very real parental personalities type. Like, I saw parents do this kind of shit when I was in middle and high school. Unlike in Encanto, for example, where Abuela has one sympathetic scene, but it doesn't exactly connect in a way that would excuse her actions, and she still, for most of the movie, doesn't come across like a likable, cute character either. Ming has a dozen adorable scenes and interactions with May. They really feel like a close family unit that just has a couple of issues, and it feels very neutral to believe that Ming would, like, take a bullet for her girl or something, most likely. I mean, things I definitely don't like in the movie, like I said, the plot doesn't really matter, but I find the panda scheme at school just very strange, I guess. It feels the weirdest and kind of creepiest, like they're selling panda merchandise out of a school bathroom. This does not even feel comparable to true-to-life childhood experiences. I can't even perceive of what the fuck is happening, you know? Like, the lying to your parents thing and having anger fits and all that other stuff feels like metaphors for real childhood experiences, but, like, hustling other 13-year-olds for almost $1,000 for weird-ass, like, novelty goods is pretty outlandish, and it doesn't even come across as silly outlandish. I was just watching and I was like, what the fuck am I looking at? I don't like the stupid, unimportant friend fight. It's very removable. It's very weird that Miriam would even take offense to May not being honest with her mother. Like, I would think, based on how they act the entire movie, that the friends would understand in that situation and would be trying to help May save face with her parents. Why would Miriam even have any reason to care what May's mother thinks of her? I don't get how it can be seen as being thrown under the bus when it's literally someone else's parent that has no authority over Miriam. Even looking at it from child logic, this is kind of forced and feels unnatural, should have been easily cut. I don't like that there's like one or two songs that they sing like 8 times over and over in this movie. I don't like the tacky flashback montage in that one scene. It's hard to do a flashback montage and have it not feel tacky. I don't know if I love this or hate this, but Mei Lin randomly gets the ability to double jump near the end of the movie? Question mark? Yeah, it becomes, like, plot relevant that May can do a fucking Super Mario double jump. It looks super video gamey, and it's extremely random and unexplained, but I kind of love it. I love the whole friend group. They have a great energy. I'm not the biggest fan of Miriam, though. Out of all of them, I think my favorite moment with Miriam is when she backtalks some random kid in math class. But Priya and Abby feel super unique. They have a unique vibe. And Miriam is just another friend with like the same personality. I don't know. I'm just not. She's not big on that character. I don't know. Okay, back to the great shit. The themes in this movie really remind me of a paper I once read from a psychology professor on his analysis of violent media's effect on children. And his own lived experience reading Hulk comics growing up, I believe. He talks about how he was raised in a very sheltered, conservative way, and he was afraid of himself. He felt that he lacked control over himself. He was afraid of having anger fits or possibly acting out in violence in certain situations. When he, as a child, got into consuming violent media, he felt a satisfaction from the portrayal of violence and destruction, and he started to emote and relate to the stories of anger and violence, you know? He understood his own emotions better as he expressed them through media, and he became more angry. And it was through this experience that he learned self-control. He learned to be comfortable with his anger and his perception of his own violence. It's like being a cook. You know, knives are dangerous and scary if you don't use them properly, but if you're afraid of a knife, you can't cook. You won't be able to learn how to be safe with one. You have to stop being afraid of it and learn how to control it, you know, in order for it to stop being a danger to yourself. Mistakes are a part of learning, especially when it comes to feelings. You need to actually feel something to understand it. Turning Red is also great in that it's one of the only movies I've ever watched where the whole time, I was thinking, man, this was clearly directed and written by a woman. There are plenty of great movies directed by women that just feel like good movies, but I feel like anyone could have written them, you know? But this one in particular just thrives with its authenticity toward womanhood, childhood, and how it's not shy or forced or trying to create some sort of image around its female characters, one way or another. It's not bothering with trying to support or trying to contradict any male-driven stereotypes. It's just characters that are definitely women and couldn't be male characters, but they're just natural human characters, you know? This movie doesn't even remotely shy away from gendered topics or topics that are segregated by nationality, religion, relative culture, etc. And as such, it doesn't ever feel forced or shallow about any of it. Like, there's this line right near the start of Soul, for instance, where Jo talks to the school principal and says her foreign last name, I forget what her name was, and it's said in such, like, a direct and ham-fisted way, and there's nothing else happening in the scene, and it's so painfully unnatural and obvious that they felt like they had to make this super aggressive line read to make it painfully clear that this was, like, a non-Western minority, position of power character. Like, there was nothing else going on. You were forced to notice it. It was unavoidable. Where Turning Red has an intensely realized setting, where you can just get the sense that there's so much behind every single different thing. There's so much influence that goes to relatively unspoken behind, like, Tyler's personality and his clearly well-to-do family, his loneliness and outbursts, his relationship with his parents, why he has cash to throw around, but no close-knit friends that he lashes out and bullies people for attention, etc., that isn't solely focused on, but you can interpret so much from. There's so much influence that you can read into subtextually behind Priya's teenage, edgy, role-playing aesthetic and how she attempts to achieve individuality through mimicking the media that she likes, and the cultural subtext behind how influential Twilight and other media was on the culture of teenage girls in this relative time period. This is how you use, well, not that time period, but inclusion as a way to bolster your setting and make your world and characters explode with life. Turning Red also just has an insane level of attention to detail. It has a lot of silent storytelling just told off of small details, like how Tyler, you can see in certain scenes, got matching friendship bracelets that all of our girls are wearing throughout the whole movie, or the girl in the bathroom wearing her diabetes patch, or just little things that goes by so quickly you can easily miss them. The shots in this movie are just so snappy and chock full of shit. There's often like 5 different things to pay attention to every single second that passes. Each character is doing something worth noticing in every single shot. You know, background characters are all utilized. There's often multiple characters talking at once, perhaps also during narration as well, while acting as well. None of the dialogue is wasted. There is honestly so much content to appreciate. You can watch this movie 5 times and not pick up on all of it. It is so alive, man. It's nothing like these shitty movies and TV shows where 2 characters are just like cut close-up camera, they just flatly say their generic-ass lines back and forth one at a time. It's the same with the comedy. It's not like the movie just presents you with a straightforward gag or a joke. You watch characters do what they find funny amongst their friend group, which you don't actively find funny yourself, but you can appreciate their passion and their unabashed cringe, and it becomes retroactively funny because you're laughing at them laughing at dumb, poorly thought out cringe shit that pops into their heads. There's a lot of learned behavior and teenage insecurity that informs a lot of how these characters act that isn't over-dramatized either. Again, nothing about childhood is presented in this movie as some big no-no, some sinister force for children to avoid. This is a fun movie for kids about exploring their feelings, and all mistakes are good mistakes. Being cringe is a growing opportunity. Losing your cool, having not control of your emotions is a growing opportunity. You know, getting embarrassed is a growing opportunity. The movie's core message is not to like give a clear character flaw that needs to be overcome. It's encouraging mistakes. You know, that is the idea. The core message is that it's not only a great thing to teach kids and to keep in mind when raising them, but it also helps the movie not feel overly dramatic like most kids' movies that act like something is super duper important, because this movie is just like, hey, don't worry about it. It happens, man. You take it on the chin, you grow from it. I think my favorite little moments in this movie is when, like, Mei Lin is getting angry, because it really, really comes across like how an actual kid gets angry in real life. From the perfect vocal performance that makes her like growling noises like kids make when they're mad, and how she doesn't really sound intimidating because she sounds like she's trying to push herself to sound as scary as possible, but like a child's voice is inherently limited. It sounds so true to real life kids. Like when they get really mad, like a kid would try to like scream really loudly, but they aren't trained vocally to project their voices very far, but so it sounds kind of forced and pathetic when actual kids do it. Mei Lin's voice actor portrays this perfectly, and she is top-notch in this film. This is something you can't really appreciate until you've watched a shitload of media and become super, super critical, to the point where even your feelings are critical, not just your academic observations and logical deductions. But you can really tell the difference between a piece of media with a lot to take in every second and something that's more dead and hollow. Like, a lot of movies have basically the same plot, similar characters and so on, but one can be super believable about it and really make you buy into that plot and trust in the authenticity of and the emotions of the important shit, and the other media feels like it's going through the motions without really selling you on it. This movie is so chock full of shit to appreciate every single second. Fucking awesome animation, fucking super goop. You'll never stop being overwhelmed with stimulus. All of it feels nuanced, it's layered. When a character says something, it always has subtextual value. It isn't just taken at face value. It always speaks about something about the character and the culture that influences them. I decided to finally watch Soul yesterday, since I'm back to having a Disney Plus subscription, and I got maybe 15 minutes in before I was too bored to keep watching. It's just so on the nose. Every beat of every scene is so cut and dried in terms of its clarity, right? It could not be more obvious and simplistic, telling you what the point of every word or action is. There was nothing for me to take away other than Joe is sad. Joe wants music. Joe doesn't appreciate teaching. Joe feels pressured by family to have stable job. There is literally nothing else to get out of these interactions because the characters and events are so mind-numbingly simple and obvious. There's nothing interesting that makes you think twice in the presentation. There's no exaggeration about anything. There's no self-ironic elements. It's all painfully straightforward. I immediately went back to watch Turning Red for a fourth time because it just has more energy, man. It's bombarding you with subtext, with context, with content, with sensory overload, with this perfect, snappy pacing, and overload of personality and nuance. Characters, setting, presentation of the film, editing. There are like 5 different lenses to every single scene and 20 different things to pay attention to all the time. Like in any given situation, there's a gray zone between like the cartoony nature of a scene that it's taken and whether this is a reflection of the kids in their own perception or if it's a self-ironic reflection on the goofiness of childhood and their naivete, or if it's a genuine embrace of whatever goofy, cringy shit is happening, or all of the above, you know? Like, take an extremely simple shot near the beginning of the movie. May, in her opening monologue, is talking to the camera about, like, her hustler attitude, her self-confidence and such. She does whatever she wants when she wants. And we immediately have to question, who is she talking to? Is this her perception of herself? Is this true narration, or is she an unreliable narrator? She talks about her willingness to do whatever she feels like. She says, you know, she does a cartwheel, fails miserably about it. Shit falls out of her backpack, and she looks embarrassed and reserved as she picks things up and is looking at the people around her that are staring at her and puts them back in her backpack. It's clear that she takes actions that generate judgment from the people around her, and she has a self-perception. Like, it's very similar to Kanji in Persona 4. Kanji viewed himself as a self-determining rebel who did whatever he wanted and couldn't care less about what other people thought of him, right? He's like, I do what I want. Who cares what labels I get? When in reality, that very perception is what he wanted to project to others. He was so focused on his self-perception of being outside the grain of society and being a rebel that he was accidentally basing his whole personality around what other people still thought of him. Just in an attempt to reject the judgment of society, he still based everything around trying to make other people see him as a rebel. You know, in a very similar sense, Mei wants to project an air of being above society. She pretends to believe herself to be above labels, but she's actually seeking out an egoistic image where she feels superior to the people judging her. Like most humans, her self-perception is intertwined with the image she wants to present herself as. She's a layered character that is equal parts self-confident and concerned and embarrassed about the judgment of others. We can immediately see a complex human character from this one tiny gag shot that is also self-ironically presented, knowingly. You know, its irony is presented in comedic. Like you already have a perception. It's not treating this like a some final act or some definitive message or something that's really it treats it like something you should already have a perception of. So yeah, that is what tightly compacted storytelling and presentation is all about. As I'm wrapping up, there are a few more other things I'd like to mention. Character design in this movie, great, fantastic. I think the creators knew this, and that's why they made the credit sequence dancing silhouettes, because being able to instantly tell a character just off of their silhouette alone is a strong attribute of great character designs. I think my favorite sequence in the movie is the nightmarish sequence with all the weird-ass cool horror imagery and like the fucked up mermen and the dismembered worms and other shit. That part is fucking baller. And can I just say how smart it is to place this movie in 2002? It has so many I'm dying. Sorry. It has so many advantages. It's better, obviously, for placing it during a time period the writer can reflect on from their own personal experience. But more than that, it lets the dialogue feature a lot of older slang and shit that reads as extremely cringy now, and probably did back then too. But it's the kind of cringe that we're so used to cringing at that it becomes anti-cringe. It's tolerable, unlike when middle-aged writers try to replicate modern child slang and they just fail miserably at it. It also gives a suspension of disbelief, or like a suspension of cringe, because we understand that it takes place in 2002, and all these fucking little assholes are allowed to say shit like bomb.com. Lastly, it's genius because I think it's really hard for modern writers to tackle school life of any grade set in the present day, because a huge portion of the film would inevitably have to be about social media. And I don't think most films and most writers are really capable of tackling social media in a way that would feel authentic, but wouldn't feel like just how literally every other movie in the modern day tries to tackle social media, where it just feels very overly simplistic and ham-fisted. I certainly wouldn't want to try to write a story about the real childhood experiences when social media is a huge part of their lives, so I think it's a great choice to set this in a time where kids don't even have cell phones. Okay, so those are my thoughts on Turning Red. It's a baller movie. It's super good. I think it's my favorite Pixar movie. Unironically, really, really fucking great. It's so filled with quality shit, man. It actually feels like it was made by women for women and doesn't present some fake, glorified version of gendered topics. It feels indie, and it feels super fucking postmodern, so it doesn't really have the traditional straightforward emotional drama or straightforward comedy or anything you would get from other movies, but it is extremely relatable and true to life, so yeah, big fan. Okay, so I don't know how the fuck I record this shit or anything. I don't know how to get footage of actual movies, because most streaming sites are designed so that you can't record them or take images from them or anything, so I don't know how to present this. I don't know how other movie reviewers do this kind of shit, but, like, okay, I'm about 19 minutes and 50 seconds in. on Turning Red on Disney Plus, and like there's just like for example, this like real like is a perfect example of like the sheer level of quality and jam-packed content and thought and energy that was put into this movie. So Maylin is like sitting on her bed, like she is just talking, just kind of monologuing, but while doing that, her character is holding her arm backward to try to feel for her bed, because she's not facing it, she's moving backwards, and her arm is kind of like moving out like that. She touches it, figures out where it is, and then sits down on her bed, right? That's the only motion. Like, she's talking, and then her character's just doing the simple action of sitting on her bed, and yet it's animated in such a detailed way. Like she raises her leg to like sit up on the bed like you would normally do, but her leg slips slightly, like she goes off balance, or she doesn't like, and then she loses balance slightly. I mean, not visibly. It's just her leg slips on her first attempts, and then she raises it up and sits back on the bed. It's not prominent. It's not like the focal point of the camera or anything. It's completely missable, just like this innocuous little detail or anything. But it's natural, it's understandable, it's believable, it's something that you wouldn't see in like some boring ass amateur scripted fucking piece of shit whatever, you know, where like most amateur writers, they look at a scene, right, and they're just like, okay, what is the purposes of this scene, and then the characters just serve as puppets to like enact the purposes of that scene, and they don't feel human outside of it. Like, they exist to hit their beats, say their lines, do their actions that service the plot and whatever. And something like this, like a writer or director or something had to like think to stop. Well, what if when she we should stage her in the scene to sit on this bed, and like what if her leg slipped slightly and she was readjusted herself, like she was slightly off balance while sitting on the, like, it's so detailed, it's so like unnecessary, but they added human character to it. They added like it's fucking, the entire movie, like, there's not a single wasted anything. There's no wasted, like, if there's emotion, if there's like a simple action that needs to be done in this scene, or if it's like, okay, we need the character to say these lines, well, let's not just have them boringly standing around saying these lines. Let's let's stage them in the scene. Let's have them do something interesting, and let's frame it in an interesting way. You know, if they're just taking a simple action, if they're just gonna sit down on a bed, let's add some detail to it. Let's add some context to it. Let's add some character to it. Let's jam pack it with so much fucking detail, man. It's crazy shit.